Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How Momentpin Improved Security and Cost Efficiency with AWS Well Architected. We've got three speakers on today. We've got Audit, who is the VP of Engineering at Cloudsoft, who'll be speaking first. He's got 20 years of experience developing distributed applications, mostly in the enterprise sector. So he'll be talking to us a bit more about Well Architected and the process of it and kind of going through a more technical approach to it. Next up, we've got Nabil Sheikh, who is the CEO and founder of Momentpin, who will be talking about his own experience with his business with Well Architected and linking that back to Alad's introduction to the program and how it helped develop Momentpin. And last but not least, we've got Andrew Robinson, who is from AWS. He's a senior solutions architect who will be approaching Well Architected with obviously an AWS background and telling us how they've been able to help many companies improve their businesses. So first up, we've got Alad. It's up to you.
Thanks, Polly. So I'm going to give an overview of the Well Architected review. So first off, when you look at your system that your team is building, can you answer the question, are you well architected? This isn't a binary question. It's not yes or no. So we can explore, what do we actually mean by that? Why should you even care? And how do you answer that question? And more importantly, how do you then improve to make your systems even better architected? So first off, what do we mean? We're thinking about all aspects of the application. We're not just thinking about an architecture diagram. We're also thinking about how do you manage that application, including upgrades, responding to problems. We're thinking about whether it's secure, so what level of security matters for your application. Is it reliable? So what happens if a component fails or if there's some huge spike in traffic? And are your technology choices right for delivering this efficiently and in a way that keeps costs down? These are all trade-offs. There's lots of design decisions involved, and there's no single right answer. You need to explicitly consider a lot of these trade-offs and also revisit them as your application evolves and the usage changes. So the AWS Well Architected Framework is a piece of thought leadership from AWS. It gives a framework for thinking about all aspects of the application. This framework is generic. You can apply it to workloads that are running in AWS or in another cloud or on-prem. The benefits include lowering risk. So whether that's to do with security or reputational risk of problems with reliability or when you do upgrades and rollback, being well architected will decrease those risks. It also allows you to think about the trade-offs and the decisions. So where best practices are not followed, that's often due to a lack of explicit decisions rather than bad decisions. For example, not thinking about some operational concerns while you're actually writing the application. The well-architected framework and the review is a great way to learn about AWS best practices. I'll talk more about the resources available and the review process later. And by following these best practices, many benefits, including being able to build and deploy faster and more confidently. So how do we answer the question of, are you well architected? What you can do is carry out a well architected review for a chosen workload. We recommend that you focus on a single application for a given review. This is a conversation rather than audit. A review with Cloudsoft would last about 4 hours. It would involve 2 Cloudsoft solution architects who are experts in cloud automation and applications. So we can talk about your application architecture and your design decisions across the full spectrum of that application. It's full of pragmatic advice and recommendations. And then a few days later, after the review, we present back our findings. We can then help to actually make those improvements, like do those remediations. So I can't stress enough that this is a conversation rather than an audit. We're working together to improve. We're talking about best practices that are specific to your application, and we'll continue looking at what matters most for your application. So this isn't an abstract list of best practices. This is very much tailored towards what matters for you. It's important to involve all the key stakeholders in this because we're going to discuss the business priorities and trade-offs. For example, cost versus reliability. It's never one or the other, it's always a trade-off. It also should involve the operations and developers and security. And in the spirit of DevSecOps, we want all these people to work together and share. We'd also recommend that this is not a one-off. This isn't a single point in time review and then you're done. This is a process of continuous improvements. The changing demands on your application, and also once you fix the top priority things, there's more to do. We'd also encourage people to do it early, so it's easier to fix things before there are lots of production users or you want a huge scale. And this encourages shift left thinking, finding and resolving problems earlier. Let's look again at the areas covered during the review. These are referred to as well-architected 5 pillars, and I had them listed on the slide earlier. First off is operational excellence. That's a broad topic. As well as covering monitoring, running, and upgrading your application, it also covers continual improvement of your operations and many of the best practices in DevOps. The security pillar is often the biggest area of focus during reviews. AWS security is job zero, but that's not often the case in other companies. There are lots of security best practices to think about. It could cover human access, permissions for programmatic access, how to lock down your network and compute resources, how to defend against and respond to threats. These best practices aren't just about configuring things well once as well. They're about including processes and a mindset to ensure your application stays secure. The reliability pillar is about keeping your application healthy, meeting your service level objectives, even when there are failures or big spikes in traffic. For absolutely any application running anywhere, if you leave it running for long enough, there will be component failures, there will be network issues, and lots of other problems. On AWS, there's a brilliant toolbox available for architecting reliable, highly available, and highly scalable applications. But the trick is to choose the right tools from that toolbox, which leads on to the performance efficiency pillar. Again, there are lots of design decisions for the sort of compute and storage resources to use. So what should you choose from that AWS toolbox? Well, the right choice very much depends on your application and your use cases, and on the expertise and experience within your company. And finally, we've got the cost optimization pillar. This covers understanding and tracking your costs, avoiding unnecessary costs, and reducing costs. For example, if you were to turn off all your developers' environments overnight and at weekends, you'd reduce that cost by 70%. Or even better, if you could automatically provision the developer's environment only when it was needed and tear it down immediately afterwards, you could reduce that to just a few hours a week potentially. So one thing that I love about AWS are that they're encouraging people to reduce their costs on AWS. And that's because they want you to run more of your workloads in AWS and to evolve your applications to use more AWS services. And they want other companies to migrate to AWS as well. An important part of doing that is to ensure that customers are having a good experience. This includes being cost effective, but it also includes all the other pillars. If a customer has a security problem because they didn't follow best practices, it looks bad for everyone. So we all want your applications to be well architected. Let's talk about some of the resources that are available. There are great resources out there from AWS. They've got a set of white papers as well as a general white paper. They've also got a white paper per pillar, and they've got lenses that talk about well architected for specific kinds of workload. They've got a well architected tool, which is a set of self-service questions that you can fill in, and these are brilliant ways of learning. But we'd also recommend having a conversation with tailored advice from experts, especially what to actually do in AWS. In AWS, there's a lot to know, and there's a lot of different ways of doing things. It's not just about the sheer number of services and huge number of configuration options for each. It's also about how these services work together and how they work with existing technology choices. For example, how should you be monitoring, alerting, and automating responses in AWS if you're already using a tool like New Relic or Datadog or Dynatrace? There's a big gap between following an AWS blog post, getting something running within minutes, and having it production ready. This involves tailoring it to your use case and your trade-offs, adding monitoring, alerting, the operations team being able to manage it, understand how to troubleshoot if something goes wrong, locking down access. All of these things take expertise and time. And this is a common theme. So if we take go global in minutes from the advantage of cloud, the AWS list, So I agree that this is a big advantage. Try doing that with a conventional data center and it'll take months of effort. But what I take issue with is when it says in minutes. This is ignoring a lot of important detail. It ignores the considerable care and effort to ensure that you've fully automated everything, that you have no region-specific references such as machine images or certificates that are stored in a particular region in Certificate Manager, and that your QA team either don't want to test it in the new region or that they've already done so. So if this was an important business goal for you, then a well-articulated review with CloudSoft would discuss the business need. We talk about your timeframes, your jurisdictional constraints, and all those business areas. What it would mean for your specific application to go global, and whether there's other alternative solutions, such as would CloudFront be a better solution, so the content delivery network might deliver the benefits you want for going global. And finally, we'd recommend a set of incremental, pragmatic steps to adopt these best practices in order to get you where you want to go. So a review gives this tailored advice to your business priorities, your application, and where you are in your cloud journey. For example, what kind of security risks are most important to you? What kind of data are you processing? If you're already following a lot of AWS best practices, then we'll skip those and we'll go on and talk about more advanced stuff with you. If you're newer to AWS, we'll focus on a different set of high-risk, quick wins. We can also inspect your account. If your security team is happy to give us temporary read-only access, then we'll do a combination of automated checks and manual inspection, and this will inform that conversation. And of course, we can help with remediation and with fixing things, improving things. Let's take a security example. So first, it's important to note that improving security, it can start with a few hours of work, and it can be followed up with weeks, months, even years of further improvements. And these are always trade-offs. A well-architected review for a large company with a full-time security team will be very different compared to a small company where there's no one with security in the job title. Similarly, a conversation with a company been using AWS for years will be very different from a company that's using AWS. So if we look at one of the questions, how do you control human access? So this is a screenshot from the white paper. It shows a set of considerations to have there with best practices. And a review might flag this up as a high risk. There's a lot of good advice in here, but how do you actually action that? What should you do first and how? So CloudSoft, during the review, would discuss these concrete improvements tailored to your risk profile. If we take an example of one of those, we've got least privilege. This is really hard to fully lock down, and it will also change as your application operations evolve. Like, this is not binary. It's not that, well, some people might have this range from employees have full administrator access. At the other extreme, some companies might have AWS roles that lock down permission to the absolute minimum. And lots of companies will be somewhere in between. And the question is, when is that good enough? And that decision will vary depending upon the company, the risk profile. At some point, it will switch to being there are now more important security issues that should be addressed instead of this. So one thing you can do during that conversation is to describe it in a way that more stakeholders will be able to understand and think about. For example, we could talk about, could an employee delete your production database and all your backups? So everyone on AWS uses identity and access management. It's one of the key services to set up your users, to set up your permissions, but it is really hard to use well, to make sure that you've locked down the permissions to only what's needed. And that's just one of the tools in the toolbox as well. There's lots of other mechanisms you can use to lock down access. And a well-architected review with CloudSoft is a good way to discuss those, to find out about best practices and the options available, and also to get help with configuring it. The aim of a well-architected review is to ensure your application meets its business goals. Those can include being cost-effective, secure, reliable, but I should really say secure enough and reliable enough. So if you're worried about a foreign state power hacking your application, your trade-offs are going to be very different from most other companies. It also includes the ability to release new features at the required rate and do so safely. A well-architected review with CloudSoft, although it will be a lot of deep dive into tech choices, It's always going to be steered by your business priorities and how to achieve those through the best practices. And when we present back, it's going to be a prioritized list of recommendations. There might be hundreds of things that could be improved, but we need to first focus on what are the quick wins that reduce some of the high risks. And as an AWS Advanced Consulting partner, we can help you make those improvements as well. I'd like now to hand over to Nabil, the founder and CEO of Momentpin, and we'll hear about his experience working with Cloudsoft with the Well Architected review, and Cloudsoft then helping Momentpin with the follow-on remediations to improve those high-risk areas.
Thank you, Alid, for that. So, hi, my name's Nabil Sheikh. I am the CEO and founder for Momentpin. The next slide. Yeah. So what's Momentpin all about? Momentpin is it's a private family social network. Started in 2011, inspired by the advent of and growth of social networks in the world. You had the likes of Facebook, Bebo, MySpace, hundreds of millions of users talking about growing their user base. And what I started to notice with social networks was the dangers of them. And I thought to myself, is this a world where I want my children growing up being able to have conversations with people they've never met, being able to talk about anything and everything? It was all very kind of uncontrolled. And coming from a technology background, uncontrolled is a major issue for techies. We're all kind of zero and ones. So the initial social networks started off, people loved it. They talked about connections. They talked about being able to reach out to people, communicate, share ideas and thoughts. And yeah, it was brilliant in the beginnings of it. But nearly 7-10 years on, we're starting to see the problems with social networks and what impacts that they've had on number of areas of people's personal lives to corporate lives. So I think the world is well educated now to understand the issues of social networks. We've had things like the Cambridge Analytica taking people's data without their consent. We've had now discussions around price of giving up your data, targeted adverts, and apps that listen into your conversations. You're suddenly talking about someone, and social network suddenly says, "Hey, how would you like to connect to this person?" The impact of social networks on the younger generation. We're seeing things like depression and anxiety in the younger generation X or Y or whatever. And for us, it was the story of Molly Russell, who ended up committing suicide, from joining a social network, and that's what the parents believe. And the social network not giving access to their data to say, well, hold on, they believe a crime's been committed, and here we are. It's it's our data. We'll do what we want to do. For us, we went then back and looked at all of this, and we said, we do want a clean and safe place for the users. It has to be friends and family orientated, meaning connect to people who you really know, share things that you really know. And young children learning about digital environments. So our network is designed to have a parent-child relationship in there, so the parent or guardian can create moments of memories for the child. And when the child is able to get onto a phone, which is as young as 4 years old now, they can safely go to a place where the content has been curated by the parent or guardian. So that child is looking and experiencing all real things which have been developed specifically for them. So that's the kind of core vision of Momentpin. We're out to we're out to save the world. And then the idea then turned into a social network. We then started to build those feature sets into our product. So Momentpin was solving the problem of the privacy that's core to what we're doing, and the control for the users. And how does this manifest itself into the application? We have controlled connections as opposed to uncontrolled. So people can only connect to you if you've got their number. No ability to direct message. So if we are part of a moment, although I can see people in this seminar, I still don't have access to a direct number. No statuses. We're trying to take away the whole aspect of addictiveness. Contact details are never shared. Containers of information in the form of moments. So you're kind of talking about a particular subject because you've gone into that, as opposed to messaging tools and other networks where you can have a free for all conversation. And finally, there's no adverts or data mining in what we do. So we have a very clear commercial revenue model, and this is the purpose of kind of providing the whole kind of history and details around Momentpin was because this ultimately led us to come to the conclusion that it was really important that we looked at our application and infrastructure, and we reached out to people out there. So as a company, we looked at all the other cloud solutions out there, and we concluded that Amazon Web Services was the right fit for us. So we put all our we used them for our infrastructure, and then ultimately because of the nature of what we're doing, security, privacy, ensuring that we've got the right partners monitoring our network, we kind of led us to the whole well architected overview. So we went out and we try to understand, right, what can AWS and its partners provide, and we kind of reached to this conclusion that or the door that the well-architected overview was really important. So for us, we have an application front end, the mobile app itself, developed on both Android and iOS in native language. So we're not using hybrid or web applications. We just believe that developing in the native languages, the applications run faster, and we have a lot more control over it. In terms of our encryption, we're using RSA 2048 with SHA 256 algorithms. The Amazon Web Services that we're using. Just going to go to the next slide. I'll give an overview of that. So in terms of the AWS overview and infrastructure that we're using is we're using kind of web service with the web server, the DB servers, data and cache servers. Other than none of the services are publicly accessible other than the web server. This is used to gain access. We're looking at aspects of security. So the Momentpin servers are hosted within AWS using multi-factor authentication, using the identity management, access management in AWS, and all the firewalls and everything that's provided. And what we found using the AWS environment and infrastructure, that we had a lot of flexibility in terms of what we can pick and choose. And our team, when they initially put everything together, we've got a number of environments. We've got a production, our dev, and so on and so forth. And we found the flexibility was really, really good with AWS. So in terms of our kind of benefit overview, so we reached out to AWS, we got CloudSoft engaged, and in terms of the actual benefits of the AWS review, we went through the 5 pillars as Alan outlined before, and it was really good in terms of the outputs from that. So we had our strengths and the potential improvements. So when it came to the operational side of what we're doing, the improvements included things like run books and playbooks. Being a startup company, typically we develop first and then document later, and I'm sure we're not the first nor the last people to be doing that. Covering things like the major incidents, what recommendations that they brought in for that. In terms of our security, locking down the identity and access management, hard-coded keys. Avoid using those. Avoid using credentials which are offline. Locking down the SSH access as well. Some of the advantages that we had was the good and simple architecture that we hold. Reliability. We've got the CloudWatch agent for disk usage, and reviewing our disaster recovery. And when it's not a case of if, it's a case of when we are hacked, what do we do next? What are all those paths? Where are all the kind of firewalls in there? How does that work? And how much access can we restrict at each level as you get down to our databases, specifically because we are a network which captures high value content. So security and locking down was very important for us. On the performance efficiency side, CloudSoft gave some very good suggestions. And just going back to basics, I guess, in terms of benchmarking, make sure you got that all right. Document DB for feeds, using horizontal clusters, horizontally scalable clusters as opposed to just one large EC2 instance. So those kind of feedback from the review was really important and good for us. And in terms of the costs, and again, this is something really important for us, was the ability to configure billing alerts. So when we do reach a certain level, we are made aware. The infrequent access for old data, it's cheaper to store old data. So let's look at putting the old memories into an S3 infrequent access for that, and reducing the database backup retention time. So all of these things in terms of costs were really important for us, and these were the specific benefits that we as Momentpin got. So from an operational, we got the team and learning. That was very important. So it's not just about what we got out of it, but what our team got out of it as well, and that was really important for us. Security breaches, we've identified a few and worked with CloudSoft to fix those vulnerabilities, and reliabilities, making application service more robust, help improving the incidents and the optimization, as I mentioned before. For us as a company, what is important is not just what we're doing, but who we're working with. And I thought it was really important to highlight these the kind of feedback that we had with working from CloudSoft. So one of the, I think it's a pet hate of mine is working with people who aren't just as passionate about your business as you are, and whilst everyone has a business to run, it's great to be working with people who are aligned to what you're doing, especially as a venture company where things are tight and difficult and challenging every day. It's great to be working with partners who understand that and really help and support you along the way. So some of the kind of engagement overviews was it was simple and easy process to engage in the well-architected overview. And I think it's important that if you're thinking about this, to understand that there is time and effort that you are going to put into it, and but that does translate itself into reducing risk for your business and optimizing what you're doing. It might translate into a real cost saving for you. The team was very knowledgeable. So it was a great conversation between our technical team and Cloudsoft's, and the complexity was removed around what we were doing, and that for me at a higher level was really refreshing to see. The benefits were clearly explained from Cloudsoft. So they went through each of the 5 pillars and basically give a very clear explanation to them. And the benefits were driven from multiple angles, not just commercial. So, for example, team learning. So if you do have team members who are wanting to understand cloud technology, how it all hangs together, what goes on, spinning in instances, where you have security, where you can have the breaches, how do we optimize things in a cloud environment, that was really good. So it wasn't just a discussion around, okay guys, we're going to look at this and that's it. The team worked around the whole solution. It was a very clear and simple report that was produced, and the follow-up remedial works had good financial benefits for us. So after we had done the AWS well-architected review, we then went on to engage Cloudsoft in the remedial works. And again, that was something very important for us, because we got the professionals involved in it, and they executed it very well. So that's a very quick overview from myself at Momentpin. Thank you, and it's over to Andrew.
That's great. Thank you, Nabil. So yes, good morning, everybody. Andrew Robinson. I'm a solutions architect at AWS, and very pleased to be included in this session today. I just want to give you a bit more of an overview of the AWS Well Architected Framework, and give you a bit of the background about some of the content and material that's available from AWS, and also go through why some of our customers have gone through this mechanism. So when we look here at the Well Architected Framework, what we're seeing is really the 4 main reasons given for our customers adopting this. It's really about reducing firefighting, reducing the amount of capacity management that you're having to spend your time on, and using automation so that you can free people up to work on things that actually really matter to your business. It means you can then experiment, you can build value, you can release more often, and it really then gives you the ability to build and deploy faster. It's also about understanding where you have risks in your architecture and in your workload, and making sure that you're able to address them before they actually have an impact on your business and can potentially distract your team from what they're working on. Taking that ability that we then have to understand those risks means that we can make informed decisions. We've made active architectural decisions, and you can then directly apply and highlight how it might impact the outcome to your business and the objectives that you're trying to achieve. And then I think both Nabil and Alid touched on this, which is about learning best practices. We have over 170 services at AWS now, and understanding and learning the best practices for those can be quite a daunting task. There's a lot of information and a lot of data to take in there. So what we've tried to do with Well Architected is to distill that down into a few key core messages, best practices, design principles, that's a little easier to digest, especially if you're at the very beginning of your journey to the cloud. So it's making sure your teams are aware of those best practices, and really the lessons that we at AWS have learned and seen what works for our customers. So thinking about well architected as a mechanism, and it's really something there that's been designed and built to help you as a customer be successful in your cloud journey. It's about learning those strategies and those best practices for how to architect in the cloud, measuring your architecture against those best practices. And as a point on that, this isn't us at AWS saying that this is how you must architect and how you must build. This is what we have learned from the tens of thousands of reviews that we've conducted, from the millions of customers that we have running workloads on AWS. And it's about the lessons we've learned from working with them that we're then able to put into this framework, and then make sure that all our customers can take advantage of this. And then, of course, once you've measured your architecture, you can then improve it. You then know where those risks are, and you can improve the architecture by addressing any of those issues that exist there. So Alid touched a little bit earlier on about what the framework is. So it really consists of the 5 pillars that both Alid and Nabil mentioned. Each one of those pillars has a number of design principles. These are, in effect, our best practices. And then what we've done is taken those design principles and provided a set of questions. So the questions are based on design principles, and the design principles sit within each of the 5 pillars. The 5 pillars that we have, operational excellence, security, reliability, performance efficiency, cost optimization. The best way to think about these is think about these as the foundations. In the same way that creating a technology solution is a lot like a physical building, the construction of that. If the foundations are not solid, it could cause structural problems that undermine the integrity and the function of that building. If the foundations are not sound, it could impact the security of that building, the reliability of that building, or even the cost. You might have to then do additional work later on. If you neglect these 5 pillars when architecting a technology solutions, it can become a challenge to then build, run, operate a system that delivers the functional requirements and meets the expectations of your business. However, when you incorporate these pillars, it will help you to produce a stable and efficient system that allows you to spend your time focusing on the functional requirements. And this is what we've seen from those tens of thousands of reviews that we've done with our customers. So I mentioned there a little bit about these design principles. So we have general design principles and pillar-specific design principles. So the design principles are there to help you adopt an appropriate mental model when building for the cloud, ensuring that you take advantage of the capabilities that AWS can offer, and that you're then able to free yourself from some of the constraints that you may have seen with traditional approaches. For example, automation is a design principle that we refer to as a general design principle. Automation allows you to be able to create and replicate your systems at a low cost and avoid the expense of manual effort and some of that heavy lifting. It's also a pillar-specific design principle. In this case here, we're looking at automating responses to security events. So whilst automation there is a general design principle that can help you save time and effort, we can also take that same design principle and apply it at a pillar-specific level as well. So looking then in a little bit more depth about the questions that we have. All of the content for this, the white papers that Nabil and Alid mentioned as well, all available online for you to have a read through. So we're looking here specifically at one of the questions from the reliability pillar. So this here is the 7th question in the reliability pillar. How does your system withstand component failures? So all of the questions start out that way with a pillar area as well. So this is about failure management. We then provide a couple of sentences to give you some additional context, help you understand what that question's really trying to ask. And then we have a set of best practices that we recommend your workload is aligned to. These best practices are based on what we have seen work for customers. So again, this isn't AWS in an ivory tower telling you this is how you must do things. This is constructive, direct advice that we have seen actually work for customers out there in the field. There's also some additional content and material that's available out there. So we like to break this down into content, data, and the tool itself. So from a content perspective, this is the framework itself, the design principles, the questions, those best practices. And we also have a number of white papers that are available, both PDF and Kindle, that's available on the Well Architected website. We then have the tool, and this is the mechanism that you use to actually carry out that review. So the tool itself would include things like the workshop that you'd be doing, as Aled mentioned there, the workshop that they did with Momentpin and with Nabil and his team, and bringing that review approach together. And then we can take the data that we gather from that review, using this even to do things like documenting the workloads, having a description of the workload, the AWS accounts that it's covering, the regions that it's operating in, and having that data to then make an informed decision with. Then having that review data together with the tool and the content allows us to actually quite easily make constructive recommendations about how that workload can be improved. So next, I just wanted to move on and talk a little bit about some of the ways in which we see customers working with AWS partners to apply AWS Well Architected. And I think that Aled and Nabil touched on this point earlier, that from the intent of the review perspective, this is not an audit, it is not an assessment, it is not a pass-fail scenario. Well Architected is about working together, customers, AWS, APM partners, working together to come up with improving outcomes for that workload. So it is not about an audit. It's not designed to be an audit at all. It's about working out how that workload can be improved. I mentioned as well, this is pragmatic, proven advice. This is not AWS in an ivory tower saying you must architect in this way. This is actually what we have seen really help our customers and what they have seen be successful for them. So this is taking lessons we've learned not just directly from those customers, but also from our solution architects, our support engineers, our service teams, our professional services consultants, our APM partners, and bringing all of that together with what actually really does work for them. And it's also important that this isn't looked at as a one-time check, as a one-off exercise. This is something that has to be done on a regular, repeatable basis. The reason for that is, of course, your workloads will evolve, your business priorities and objectives may change. AWS may release new services, new features that previously meant that something that was very time consuming for you to implement is something that you could now implement in a matter of minutes or hours. So that's really what we bring here as the intent of this review. Now, of course, there's a number of different ways that these reviews can actually be delivered and how you can review your workload. Self-service is, of course, one approach that's available to you. So you can go into the tool and you can conduct a review of your workload. Of course, we then also have APM partners, such as CloudSoft here, who can help. They've been trained by AWS on how to do these well-architected reviews, on how the review process should work, and how to make those recommendations. We set a very high bar for our partners to be part of this well-architected program. And I'm very pleased to say that CloudSoft are one of the better partners that we have in this program. They've consistently been delivering some great outcomes for customers here. Then the other option that you have, if you happen to have an AWS solutions architect that's aligned to you as a customer, you can work with them as well. Now, of course, these aren't exclusive options. You don't have to choose just one approach. If you want to go through and look at the tool and do some of the responses self-service and then get somebody like CloudSoft to come in and help you work out the improvement plan or work out more deeper dive availability and go a little bit deeper into your architecture, that's absolutely fine. We want customers to have the flexibility to be able to choose how they actually go and run these workloads. So some of the benefits then of the actual well-architected process from a partner perspective. First of all, it's engaging with a well-architected partner for a review, so CloudSoft in this case. After the review has been done, after the questions have been asked, after we've done the deep dive and found out where some of those risks might sit, A statement of work typically gets put together, which shows what improvements can be made to that workload, maybe gives a short, medium and long-term plan for different improvements, things that could be fixed quite quickly, all based on the priorities of what you have within your business. Then the bit here that's only available to authorized well-architected partners is $5,000 in AWS service credits that goes directly to you as a customer. So once the review has been done and the improvement works have been agreed to, and a partner is going to be doing some of those improvement works with you, you're then eligible for $5,000 of AWS service credits. That's provided just as an AWS service credit voucher. There's no additional terms and conditions applied to it. It's basically straight up to you to apply those to your account and use them. That's only available to authorized well-architected partners. So again, another great benefit of using CloudSoft here to help you address some of these concerns. And then finally, some of the learnings that we've seen from our customers here and what they've learned from the review process. What we've seen is actually doing the review as early as possible in the life cycle of that project or that program is the best. The reason for that is because it's much easier to fix things when they're at a design stage or when they're only on a really basic, pre-delivery build. Really easy to fix those at that point in time. And it means that you can take those lessons from Well Architected and use them to influence the design as you're still designing that solution. What we also see is the most common problem is not that a bad decision was made, but just that a decision was neglected. It wasn't considered. Generally, most people don't decide that they're not going to back data up, but there's data that gets overlooked, data that doesn't get considered. Maybe a workload's running and there's some data being stored somewhere that was just overlooked and that data is not being backed up. What we also see is the majority of the workloads that we have reviews actually do contain high-risk items that need to be addressed. Finding them is not a bad thing. They were always there. Those risks within that workload were always there. Doing a well-architected review of that workload is not going to make it more risky. But what it is going to do is show where those improvements can be made. And if you address them, that's one less thing that could potentially slow down your business, potentially cause some damage to that workload. And then the final bit that I just wanted to cover about is really just to give you an idea of some of the overall use cases here. So we talked about best practices at the beginning, and that really is a key thing to learn here. If you're early on in your cloud journey, maybe you only have a couple of workloads running in AWS, or maybe you're looking at just migrating one workload in. This is a great way of learning those best practices and seeing how you can free yourself from some of those constraints that may have been placed on you operating in a traditional environment. We're also seeing customers are using Well Architected as a way of doing technology governance. So they're using it as a way of looking at all the different technology that they have and really how to govern that in one single location with a consistent mechanism, a consistent methodology to review that portfolio. And then, of course, you don't just have a single piece of technology, you have an entire portfolio. And this links quite nicely with the technology governance that you can use Well Architected as a framework and as a mechanism to assess your entire portfolio, to review that portfolio, not just from a technology perspective, but from a people perspective, process perspective, mechanism perspective, making sure that not just the workload is built correctly, but also that your teams are able to manage and operate and build that. That brings me to the end of the slides that I wanted to go through. So I will hand back over and thank you for your time.
Thank you everyone for such interesting talks. Thanks Khaled, Nabil and Andrew. Does anyone have any questions at this stage? We've got a chat box in the GoToWebinar control panel. So if anyone has questions, feel free to ask them and we're happy to answer them. We've got about 10 minutes. And if not, we also do have an email address, obviously, that you can reach us on. So it's ask@cloudswap.io if anything pops up after this event and you weren't ready to ask your questions, or you have follow-up ideas or want to get in touch about organizing your own well-architected review. So you can just get in touch with us there. And we wish you all a very nice day. Thank you all.